everyone, welcome back to Onyx Pages. I am here with a 7 cowrie shell review of Pet by Akwaeke Emezi. They are the author who wrote Freshwater, which I believe I gave a 7 out of 7 cowrie shell review to last year, and that was their debut adult novel, and Pet is their debut young adult novel. I have a feeling that this is also going to be 7 out of 7 stars. I read it over a period of 4 days, and I have to say I adored it. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, and now I'm going to tell you why. So I'm just looking over at my laptop because I have all the different cowrie shell rating things. So for world building, Pet tells the story of a young girl named Jam who lives with her parents in this city that you can see on the cover. The city's name is Lucille, and Lucille is a place where people live happily and comfortably because they are living in the aftermath of a revolution during which angels came and destroyed the monsters in their city. And a lot of this book really revolves around who the angels are, who the monsters are, and that history of revolution and post-revolution society. So Jam is going to school. She's got a friend named, I think her friend's name is Redemption. The names in this book are great, and they're best friends, and it's very, very sweet. So I really enjoyed the world building. To get into this, to tell you more about the world would be to spoil, so I'm not going to do that, except to say that it was really, really interesting. Really took up a lot of the issues that we're dealing with in contemporary society, and Emezi does what they did in Freshwater, which was to make this outer landscape and also the inner landscape of the characters really alive and engaging. So full cowrie shell for world building. In terms of characters, the story is, so you'll recall that for this cowrie shell, the question is, are the characters well developed? Are they intersectional in identity? Is at least one of the characters LGBT identified, and are they the ones I most need to hear from? And absolutely. As the center of this novel, as the protagonist, Jam is incredible. Jam is, there's an interesting question about whether talking about the identity of a character would be to spoil it, because as the chapters move on, we learn more and more about Jam. So suffice it to say that Jam is a neurodiverse character, and definitely a protagonist that's very different from the kinds of protagonists that we would regularly see in YA. She is very clearly a Black girl, and her mom is from Trinidad, I think, and her dad is Nigerian. So you get a lot of sort of dialect, and the culture comes through the food and the dialect between the parents, and that's actually really cool. And as a character, she has she's gifted in a lot of ways, and her identity definitely satisfies all of the questions in the second cowrie shell list. So I would give this 1 out of 1 cowrie shells for characters. Points of view is the third cowrie shell, and the question here is to describe the points of view from which the story is told, and is the story told from the point of view of the most marginalized character and the one that I need to hear the most from. So I definitely learned something valuable by having this story told from the perspective of Jam. Jam is, as I said, neurodiverse. Jam is a teenager trying to figure out life, trying to figure out her relationships with her friends, her loyalties, trying to come into her own power, and really trying to understand this mystery, because the people around her don't, like, the adults remember a world without monsters, but she doesn't. And so she has questions about what the monsters were, what they were like, who the angels were, and the adults are sometimes a little bit hesitant to answer those questions. So she spends a lot of the book sort of thinking about that world and asking herself questions, and then learning on her own terms about what the world was, what the monsters are, what the angels are, and what her role is, if any, in this post revolution world. So I definitely wanted to hear the most from her. As I met the other characters in the book, I was very intrigued by them. There are Emezi has done an exquisite job of portraying families in a way that's a little unique. So there's a polyamorous family. There are characters that are non-binary. There are characters that are heterosexual. There are characters with disabilities, characters that appear to be able-bodied. There's just a lot of diversity in a lot of different ways. And for a YA novel to take that up, I think, in such a rich and obvious way is really, really great. So 1 out of 1 for point of view. The fourth cowrie shell is relevance. Describe the conflicts, themes, and problems in the story. So it would spoil it to tell you what the monsters are and who they are, and what or who the angels are. But one of the conflicts in the story is monsters versus angels, right? So I think that, like, what does it tell you in the... Okay, so the actual blurb says, there are no monsters anymore, or so the children in the city of Lucille are taught. So definitely one of the questions here, as you can see right from the beginning, is, are there still monsters? The children are told that there aren't any, but that may not be true. So one of the conflicts throughout the book is, are there monsters anymore? And what do we do about them if they're here? Another question, I think, another conflict in this book is, do adults know the best way to address problems, or do young people have better strategies? And what do you do when young people have to listen to adults in cases where young people have better solutions? And I really appreciated this story because in the sort of height of the conflict, the climax of the story, we see the different solutions that are available. We see the ones that the young people suggest, we see the ones that the adults prefer, and there's a clear difference in the preferred way to move ahead. So so there are a lot of really interesting conflicts. I also like the relationship between Jam and her best friend Redemption. It's so sweet and so loyal and so intimate, and that friendship, there are a couple of points in the book where there's tension in their friendship, and I was bracing myself for them to break up and get into this huge fight, and I was always surprised by the way that Emezi wrote that relationship into being. So 1 out of 1 for relevance. For options, describe the possible solutions offered in the story. I talked about that a little bit already. The options definitely challenged power inequities because there are questions about class that are taken up, the division of resources, abuse, violence, racism. There's a really interesting conversation about transphobia and homophobia that's taken up in this story about monsters versus angels. And at the end of the story, we have, the city of Lucille trying to figure out how to deal with these issues. And I think that the option that is chosen at the end is the best one and is the most equitable one. Otherworldly elements. Describe the otherworldly elements in the story. Do they challenge power inequities? Do they cause me to reflect? And are they awesome and super cool? I would say a full 1 out of 1 for that. There is, and this isn't a spoiler because it says here, when Jam meets Pet, a creature made of horns and colors and claws, who emerges from one of her mother's paintings in a drop of Jam's blood, she must reconsider what she's been told. And so Pet is definitely an otherworldly character, and it is scary and sweet. It actually gave me vibes from Pan's Labyrinth. The character, the fawn? in my imagination, Pet took on some of the fawn's qualities, but just really cool to see this growing relationship between Jam and this being called that she eventually calls Pet. So the otherworldly elements were really, really great. There was a lot of mysticalness to it all. And one of the things that I love about Emezi is their ability to write from within someone's mind. So they did it in Freshwater and they did it again in Pet. You actually spend a lot of time listening to the thoughts of Jam and the thoughts of Pet. Quite like in Freshwater, the main character had a number of different spiritual elements that occupied her head and her brain landscape, her mind, her spirit. There's something similar happening in Pet. So 1 out of 1 for otherworldly elements. And at the same time, it wasn't overdone. It was just enough magic and just enough humor to keep the story rolling along. And finally, overall reading experience. How did I enjoy the book? Was it enjoyable, edifying, engaging, and entertaining? A full 1 out of 1 cowrie shells for that, because I ate up this book. I absolutely loved it. I read it on my commute a lot, and you might notice, can you? Highlights all over the place, and I'll flip through it and see if there's anything that I want to share. But there was just so much here. The narration was really cool. We see Afrofuturism here, or African futurism here, in the way that Emezi imagines the city of Lucille before the monsters were gotten rid of and afterwards. And so because Jam is living in a world after the monsters have been removed, we hear a lot of people talking about back in the day, but back in the day is very similar to 2019. And whenever you have a story set in the future but characters remembering the past, it always allows the narrative voice to make commentary about the world that we're in right now. And I feel that the way that that's done by Emezi is really skillful and really seamless, and it caused me to think about the ways that I recognize our current world in this story, and it allows me to speculate as to what would happen if we made different decisions like the ones made by the people living in the city of Lucille at the time of the revolution. And the names of the characters are really sweet. There's some characters named Aloe, Hibiscus, Redemption, Jam, Moss, Whisper, Malachite. Like, the names are just awesome. And I'm sure if I put my mind to it, I would find out that, there's a poetic reasoning for those names. But Pet was a wonderful book. 7 out of 7 cowrie shells, 5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. And I would recommend this book for people who are interested in young adult African futurist fiction, folks who are interested in young adult stories that take up issues of LGBT inclusion and neurodiversity. And and for those who are thinking about how do we suggest books to young people that cause their imagination to flourish and to come up with innovative strategies to create a better world, this is definitely one of them. So it was a lot of fun, very, very cute, and an enjoyable read. All right, so I hope that you enjoyed this 7 cowrie shell review of Pet by Akwaeke Emezi, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.